Weeds. Weeds can be one of the worst things to put in your compost pile. And weeds can be one of the best things to put in your compost pile. What makes the difference? Let's talk about today how you can use weeds to turbocharge your compost and when they might become more of a nightmare, more trouble than they're worth. Hi, I'm Amy Landers with GardensThatMatter.com, where we help families create beautiful, bountiful gardens together. And we're answering the question, can I compost weeds? Now, for most gardeners, weeds are a necessary part of gardening. Sometimes you are able to stay ahead of them and you have maybe a nice thick layer of mulch and you just have to pull a few here and there. Sometimes the weeds get ahead of you. Now, this armful of weeds that I pulled out of one of our garden beds earlier, it can be great organic material to feed my compost, to feed my soil. Let's talk about how to make that happen. I'm just going to put them over here for a moment. Now these weeds, and really any plants coming out of your garden when they're finished, so lettuces or radishes that have gone to seed, tomatoes that are done, things that have died off in your garden that you're cleaning out, you can put them in your compost pile except for 3 potential problems, and those are seeds or perennial roots, plants that are going to come back from their roots. Those could be problems in your compost. The second problem is disease. If you have disease spores, fungi, and bacteria that could get carried on. And then the third one is pests that might be able to overwinter in the leaf litter or in the compost. Now, if it's early in the season and you're pulling little tiny weeds and you don't have any kind of seeds or disease yet, you're going to be fine. They can go right into the compost, no worries. If it's later in the season and you do have a lot of seed heads or disease, or maybe you're bringing material from your garden and you're worried about an infestation or something like blight, we can depend on a few factors to help us make sure that those seeds and eggs and spores are gone so that we are not propagating them and putting them back into our garden and our compost. So the first one is a nice hot compost pile. We can have a really good compost pile where we're having active, thermophilic, heat-loving bacteria that are breaking the material down. And in those conditions, very few seeds, eggs, spores are going to be able to survive. So we're talking about 140 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 degrees Celsius for about 2 weeks. Now, I do want you to think about, you either have to have all that material at the center of the pile where it's active, or you're going to want to make sure you turn your pile inside out, all the outside material goes to the inside, and it heats back up again for an extended period of time. Because if you just treat the inside and you don't turn it, then all the seeds or spores or eggs on the outer parts of your compost pile will still be there. They'll survive. So if you can get a nice, hot, active pile, then you're going to not have to worry about any of the things that might get carried into your garden because they're going to be killed in that process. Now, what does it take to get that hot compost pile? Well, shredding the material is definitely going to help you. You're going to want to get the right carbon to nitrogen ratio, greens and browns. So you're going to mix that material well, and you're going to need to make sure it has plenty of water and air. Now, we don't have time to go into all the details about that in this video, but I do have resources over on our website where we can help you learn about that process to really get a hot, active compost pile. Now, from there, if you're not sure about that hot pile, or maybe you don't have space for it, it takes a pretty big bin to get that kind of heat going. What are your options? Well, you can also depend on time. Things in a compost pile are going to break down thanks to temperature and time. That bacteria and the fungi are going to be working in there all that time. So if you can have an extended period of time that your things are in the compost, like talking about a couple years here, then most everything will either decay or kind of germinate in the pile, and you'll just take care of itself. You'll have lots of biodiversity in that pile, and you won't have to worry about it too much. But if you don't have the luxury of a hot compost pile or the time to wait, we do have a third option, and we're going to pre-treat our weeds. So one thing is we're going to make sure that we shred them up so that we don't have all this viney stuff. So run them through that lawnmower, or use your weed chopper to chop them up, or even you could use a machete to chop them. Then we are going to ferment them. And we've got a couple of approaches to do this. You can use a big plastic garbage bag, stuff it full of weeds, really shove them in there, stuff, and then tie it off, seal it off, throw it out in the sun, and it's going to kind of anaerobically digest what's going on, what's the weeds. So there's going to be alcohols and acids, and the heat of the sun on that black plastic bag, that's going to be breaking down those materials. Let a couple months go by, and that material can go right into your compost pile. It'll be a little bit stinky and slimy, but it'll get mixed in with your compost pile, no problem. Another approach is to use a big garbage can or a big container, and you're basically making a giant thing of like weed sauerkraut. We're going to ferment it. We're going to use acids and alcohols to make sure we're killing any kinds of seeds, eggs, and spores in there. Put it into the garbage can, really pack it down, add some water, maybe put a couple of rocks or bricks on top, something to hold that material down under the water. Put a top on so you don't create a mosquito larva breeding area. And again, leave it for a couple months. It'll get stinky. That liquid could be used diluted as a plant food. And then the whole thing, all the weeds and things like that can go into your compost pile after they've been kind of pre-treated that way. I have one other pre-treatment that if you have a large space and a lot of weeds and you really want to have a good system, I love this suggestion that one of our students gave us. She turned basically a cold frame into a weed oven. So she has her cold frame and she puts the weeds in it with a big glass panel on the front, closes the panel, no vent, and it gets really hot in there when the sun's hitting that directly. So she basically is cooking her weeds. She's using temperature to make sure she's killing those seeds, any kind of disease spores, any insect pests before they go into her compost bin. So another idea for you as you are thinking about what to do with your weeds. Ideally, we all catch them early. We can just chop and drop them, put them right down on the ground, let them become a nice thick layer of mulch. But sometimes they get ahead of you and you've got to figure out what to do with them. If you've got a nice hot compost pile, you can put them right in. If not, you can use a pre-treatment with fermentation and heat to really make sure you're killing those seeds or roots or spores or eggs to make sure you're not doing an infestation of next year's garden using your compost. Do you have more questions about what you can and can't compost, or about composting in general? Well, we've made it easy for you. In the description for this video, you'll find links to our website, gardensthatmatter.com. One of them is going to take you to a spot where you can sign up for the ins and outs of composting. This is a quick reference you can print to make it easy to know what can and can't go in the compost. You can also ask your own question about composting or gardening for me to answer in a future video. Thank you so much for watching today. If you want more garden goodness, be sure to subscribe. And if you know somebody else who's interested in composting, I'd love for you to share this video with them. Until I see you again, happy gardening.